Professor Davidai, you are now recognized.
My name is Shai Davidai. I'm an assistant professor at Columbia Business School. Since October 7th, when Hamas raped, tortured, slaughtered, and kidnapped more than 1,400 of my people, Columbia's campus has been a hostile environment for Jews and Israelis like me. Over the past months, Jewish students have locked themselves in dorms to avoid being assaulted. They have been spat on, attacked, bullied, vilified, chased, and told to keep effing running. This is not an exaggeration. This is the reality of what it's like being Jewish and Israeli at Columbia since October 7th. For more than 8 months, Columbia University has refused to deal with the student organizations whose leaders and members have, among other things, publicly supported Hamas, the PFLP, and the Islamic Jihad, illegally occupied public spaces on campus from which they denied entry to Jewish and Israeli students, violently took over a university building and held an employee hostage against his will, chanted in support of the Houthis, a terrorist organization whose flag calls for death to Israel, death to America, and a curse upon the Jews, called for the extermination of Israel, called for Zionists to be killed, called for rockets to be shot at Tel Aviv, supported the Islamic Republic of Iran in its attack on Israeli civilian targets, harassed a rabbi who was escorting Jewish students to safety, hosted the wife of a man convicted of providing material support to Hamas, amplified calls by Hamas for violence in Jerusalem, set up memorials for convicted terrorists on campus, called on the military wing of Hamas to attack Jewish American students, and invited speakers with known ties to terrorist organizations to an event in support of terrorism. Everything I've just noted is well documented and known to the university leaders, yet there are two Columbias, a Columbia in theory and a Columbia in practice. In theory, Columbia suspended two organizations and a handful of their leaders for their pro-terror activity. In practice, these suspensions were never enforced and they continue to organize on campus without interruptions. In theory, Columbia has stated that pro-terror campus protests are unauthorized. In practice, the university has never dispersed even a single protest. In theory, Columbia cares about the safety of its Jewish and Israeli students. In practice, it doesn't. Minouche Shafik, Jerry Rosberg, Cass Holloway, and Felice Rozan have all personally allowed these organizations to terrorize Jewish and Israeli students with complete impunity. They must be held accountable. Yet these individuals are just the tip of the iceberg. We must hold accountable the entire administration and the Board of Trustees. We must hold accountable the faculty who openly support and celebrate terrorism. Professor Joseph Massad, who expressed his jubilation and awe at the massacre, rape, torture, and kidnapping of Israeli civilians. Professor Mohammed Abdu, who openly supports terrorism, stating that he is with the resistance, be it Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Islamic Jihad. Professor Catherine Frank, who has justified terrorist attacks against Israel and has claimed that Israelis are a danger on campus. Professor Rashid Khalidi, who was reportedly the spokesperson for the PLO when it was still an active terrorist organization and who has legitimized Hamas and Islamic Jihad as resistance fighters. Professor Mahmoud Mamdani, who has called for the dismantling of the Jewish state, and Professors Asim Ansari and Kamal Jadidi of Columbia Business School, who, along with many other professors, signed a letter minimizing the massacre, rape, and kidnapping of civilians as merely a military response. These professors receive millions of dollars in federal funding for their research and teaching. These professors teach the next generation of American doctors, lawyers, teachers, leaders, and social workers. These are the professors with whom American parents entrust their kids' safety. This is why I'm here. I'm here to speak up for every decent American who believes that anti-Semitism and support for terrorism have no place on campus. I am here to speak up for every person, Jewish or non-Jewish, who believes that rape is never, never, never okay. I am here to speak up for the future of higher education. Yes, I had paid a personal price for speaking up, but I would rather pay the price for speaking up than the price for staying silent. Let me be clear, this is not about politics. The terrorists who kidnapped Keith Siegel, an American from North Carolina, did not stop to ask him who he voted for in the previous elections. The professors who called the kidnapping of Omer Nutra, an American from Long Island, a military response, do not care about his geopolitics. The students who desecrate pictures of Hersh Goldberg Polin, an American who had his arm blown off before being kidnapped into Gaza, do not care about his views on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. This is not about politics. This is about hate. Hate for Israel, hate for the Jewish people's right for self-determination, and hate for America and all that it stands for. Like the US Congress, I and many others have been asleep at the wheel for too long. It is time to take action. It is time to wake up. Thank you very much.
Professor Davidai, many of us here have heard about what happened on Columbia University's campus this spring. I'm happy that you are here with us today. So can we hear firsthand from a member of the faculty about what has been going on at Columbia, including the unauthorized encampment, which resulted in police arresting over 100 Columbia students. What do you think are the main factors that led students to feel emboldened to essentially take over Columbia's campus?
Thank you so much. That's a great question. I would say that there are two main factors. One is a complete lack of leadership and accountability from the administration. The student organizations and their leaders have seen that they can do whatever they want with complete impunity, that when they break the laws, the university will send out a strong email but will not follow it. When they get suspended, nothing actually is enforced, that they can hold unauthorized protests and won't be dispersed, that they can basically spew out hate, anti-Semitism, and pro-terror rhetoric, and nothing will happen to them. And the second factor is the faculty. There have been many faculty who've not only indoctrinated these students and egged them on to keep going, like Professor Catherine Frank, but many faculty who actually defended with their bodies to stop police enforcement of the illegal encampment. So when you have a mixture of pro-Hamas, pro-Islamic Jihad faculty and an administration that shows no leadership and no accountability, that's what you get.
So I think it's safe to say, based on your answer there, that Columbia has not been living up to its obligations to its students and fulfilling its educational purpose.
I would say that it didn't even pretend to live up. It's not that Columbia can't, it's that Columbia won't.
Columbia won't.
Professor Davidai, from your perspective, how would you say the spread of these viewpoints from faculty has impacted the student population? And if you could elaborate further than what you've already stated in terms of the actual impact on students.
Thank you so much for this question. So first of all, we have to note that there has been a systematic purging of certain viewpoints from Columbia University and other universities. It used to be the case that students who were interested in engaging in critical thinking could go and listen to the professor you mentioned, Joseph Massad, hear his viewpoints, which I completely disagree with, and then go and sit on a different class with a professor with opposing viewpoints who actually believes that Jews do have a right to exist, and the students will have some balanced point of view. The problem is that throughout 2, 3, or 4 decades, there has been a purge of professors who disagree with people like Professor Massad, Hamid Dabishi, and the sorts. And now students are just not educated, they're indoctrinated. When you are only allowed to listen to one point of view, then you end up either agreeing with that point of view because you didn't get any opposing views, or you drop out of the class. There have been experiences of students that feel like they have to write papers that oppose their own values just to get a passing grade. So I believe that's a huge problem for education.
Right, thank you.
We saw this almost with a flip of a switch on October 7th, the protests come out. Could you touch a little bit on what you saw on October 7th and 8th on Columbia as far as what the protests, including from professors, looked like?
Yeah, actually, I disagree with the premise. This was not a switch that changed. This is something that has been for decades. There's been a movie in 2004 called Columbia Unbecoming about the anti-Semitic professors, many who I have mentioned in my testimony. Columbia has known about this and done nothing about that. You asked about protests before. Well, in 2005, or starting in 2005, Professor George Saliba used to cancel classes so his students can attend anti-Israel protests. What we have seen is not a switch, it's just an increase in the vehemence. And it actually points to the question Mr. Schweikart asked of what snapped. Nothing snapped. If you look around, the vast majority of your colleagues, both Democrats and Republicans, are not here. They didn't see this as a top priority. So their constituents and the students around the country, they see that anti-Semitism, support for terrorism, is not a priority for the House. So why wouldn't they go and protest?
Okay, thank you. I am going to challenge you, though. We have oftentimes 2-3 hearings all at the same time. There's
Exactly.
a budget hearing going on as we're talking now.
That's why I said a priority. I didn't say they don't want to be here.
It's
They
not-
have other priorities.
It's not a matter of priority. We come, we go, people will be here. You'll see them coming throughout this. This is a priority. That's why we have this hearing. It is a priority. That's why we have had legislation come to the floor. And we need to make sure it stays a priority. We elevate it. And as Mr. Larson said, this is something that on both sides of the aisle, in this committee, Republicans and Democrats are focused on.
I respectfully disagree. I have to say, their priorities are, the top priority is where you show up, and this is not the top priority. It's a second, third, or fourth priority.
Mr. Davidai, I completely agree with you. I believe members of this committee were asked to serve on this committee, and they should be present, and it's all about priorities. We're busy people, but this is the most important committee in Congress, and that is why people should be in their seats. Dr. Winstrom.
What would happen if we cut off federal funds to any university that was allowing these types of things to go on their campuses?
So I would say that even before you cut it off, their knees will start shaking and change will happen. We have to remember Columbia University is the largest private landlord in New York City, and it is a tax-exempt largest private landlord. They own the land of Rockefeller Center. They own most of Morningside Heights and many of the buildings in Harlem. You know, if only the thought of losing that tax exemption would pass through their minds, you would see no more anti-Semitism. You won't see any misdoing anything on campus, because these universities, and I've spent a lot of time in these universities, they're not elite universities, they're expensive universities. All they care about is money and PR. And if you start playing with that, things will change.
Thank you.
Professor Davidai, can you speak to the shift you've seen within our universities to having so many outspoken students be comfortable with their alignment to an autocratic leader who is actively desiring the downfall of these very institutions that they are attending, that they're protesting at, and also wishing physical harm to Americans?
Thank you for this question. I'm really happy to talk about this. We're focused here on anti-Semitism and support for terrorism, but at the heart of it, you can see that this is about anti-Americanism. Just a few examples. Students for Justice in Palestine, the national organization, if you go on their website, it does not acknowledge the United States. It says that they have over 200 chapters across Turtle Island, and then in parentheses it says occupied North America, occupied United States and Canada. We had a professor, Hamid Abishi, described Israel, and I quote, as an outpost of American barbarism. This is a professor at Columbia. We had students celebrating the Houthis, right, the terrorist organization that executes gay men just for being gay, and who this morning shot down a merchant ship, a commercial merchant ship. So it really is an anti-American sentiment that is, like smarter people have said before me, it always starts with the Jews, it never ends with the Jews. And I think the best way to see that is, where do you see American flags? When the pro-Israeli groups rally, you see Israeli flags and American flags. When you see an American flag in these pro-Hamas protests, it's only when it's being burned.
If the response and the evidence we've seen, how did the universities respond to, did they take sufficient or proper response to those organizations?
I can speak about a lot of universities, but the best one that I can is my own, Columbia. Nothing. They have written beautiful emails. It took the president of the university 6 months minus 2 days to acknowledge that Hamas exists. So I have been asking, I've been pleading for them to condemn Hamas. They wouldn't even use the word Hamas in any official email until April 5th, and that was because she was subpoenaed to testify in front of Congress. So if it takes the president of a quote-unquote elite, not elite, but expensive university, to even acknowledge that Hamas is responsible for this, then I'm not surprised, and you shouldn't be surprised, that she and her administration have done absolutely nothing.
Just like, what can we do? Do university presidents have to really crack down, or what can we be doing to improve the way we communicate our dialogue and be able to get our dialogue out there so people actually learn instead of just chaos?
5 things that I think every university should do. 1, permanently ban every pro-terror student organization. Suspensions are a slap on the wrist that it does nothing. 2, expel the leaders. They know who the leaders of these organizations are. Most of the students protesting are good people, but the leaders need to be held accountable. 3, every one of these organizations has a faculty advisor. Those faculty advisors should be sanctioned and maybe fired. 4, every faculty that supports terrorism, that openly celebrates Hamas, Islamic Jihad, should not be allowed to interact with undergraduates, graduates, any student. They can still have her job, but they are not allowed to be with any students. And 5, every university should adopt the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism. If it's good enough for the US Congress, if it's good enough for the President of the United States, it should be good enough for the President of Columbia.